back to life. In the 1970s, Brighton Hill was a picturesque village located in the hills of northern England. With its stone houses, cobblestone roads, and vast green landscapes, the place seemed to have stopped in time. Life on Brighton Hill was peaceful, marked by the rhythm of the seasons and the sound of birds singing at dawn. However, an extraordinary event was about to shake the village's peace and become one of the greatest miracles in its history. William Turner was a respected farmer and father of 2 children, Thomas and Emily, along with his wife Margaret. The family was very united, and they were very proud of their culture. Thomas was a preteen boy, active and very curious. He had his mother's traits and believed all the stories about adventure from his family's past. Emily was already a more reserved girl, given to facts, and didn't have as much enthusiasm for life as her brother. The village had a representative of the Christian faith. Reverend Jonathan Blackwood was the pastor of the local church, a man of profound wisdom. He had dedicated his life to speaking about God to the entire Brighton Hill community, guiding them with firmness and love. Things in that village were always very monotonous, but that was exactly what pleased the residents there. Because everything was very predictable, this avoided great stress compared to big cities. One winter morning, an event changed the fate of the Turner family forever. Thomas, William and Margaret's eldest son, went hunting in the forests surrounding the village. At that time, there was a tradition of accumulating knowledge about nature and trying to make a living from it. The 13-year-old was also known for his skill and courage, and he always carried out his activities in the middle of the forest, always returning with a good story to tell. But that morning, the young red-haired boy didn't return at the usual time. Something would have gone terribly wrong. When it was getting close to dusk, without Thomas returning, William, worried, went in search of his son, accompanied by some of the villagers. His son's absence and the cold weather at the time were torturing William's heart. He knew that with each passing hour, the chances of having good news were greatly diminishing. After a long and desperate search, they find Thomas lying on the ground, unconscious, practically frozen, with a deep wound in his chest caused by a hunting accident. At least that's what it seemed. As there was no medical center or hospital within miles, Thomas was taken back to his home, where Margaret and Emily were anxiously waiting. Margaret, with her healing abilities, did everything she could to treat her son's wound in addition to trying to keep his cold body warm. But Thomas's condition was critical. He was between life and death, and the village's resources were limited. Even if they made a long and difficult journey to a hospital in the neighboring city, where they would find better resources, Thomas's chances of surviving were the same, because his condition was really critical. Soon, Reverend Blackwood was called, and he arrived quickly, bringing with him the strength of his faith and the hope of the community. Upon seeing Thomas's condition, the Reverend knelt beside his bed and began to pray fervently. "Lord, we ask you, in your infinite mercy, to save this young man's life. Give him a second chance and bring comfort to this distressed family and this community that admires him so much," prayed the Reverend, with tears in his eyes. The villagers gathered around the Turner home, offering their deepest support. It was a touching sight, seeing the entire community united in faith and hope, praying for a miracle. Night fell once and for all, and hope seemed to diminish as Thomas remained unconscious and barely breathing. To everyone's sadness and desolation, the inevitable happened. Early in the morning, Thomas's body was wrapped in a white sheet, and amid much commotion, he began to be laid to rest right there. There was sadness in that village, but not even the extreme cold of that morning prevented the entire community from being there. At some point before daylight, Margaret, inconsolable, leaves the room where her son's body was and asks for some time alone to breathe the cool air of home. Despite her concern, everyone there, including her husband William, lets her continue. When she is far enough away that she can neither see nor hear anyone else, Margaret kneels on the ground, raises her hands to the sky, and exclaims, "He is a good boy. My Lord, bring him back to me." Margaret could feel her knees freezing on that floor. She felt the cold wind cut her face, and the tears, of which there were many, didn't stop. But the village of Brighton Hill would still have every reason to call that place special, as no one, until that cold dawn, would have expected to experience a great miracle. Suddenly, Margaret begins to hear screams, and her name being called copiously. Thomas, who had already been presumed dead more than an hour ago, slowly begins to move in an attempt to free himself from the white sheet that covered him. Everyone there simply despaired and started screaming. Now free from the sheet, Thomas opens his eyes and breathes deeply. His normal color seemed to have returned, and the wound on his chest had stopped oozing blood. Margaret, who had hurriedly returned to her home, entered the place where she was before and realized that what was before her eyes was nothing other than the greatest miracle she had ever seen in her life. When Margaret and everyone present jumped into her son's arms, they couldn't contain themselves and seemed to be celebrating. 4 days, this incredible event was the subject and reason of all conversations in that region, which was completely understandable, since it's not every day that people witness a resuscitation. Thomas, who was already being laid to rest, had had his life restored in an inexplicable way, and every event in his life after that was interpreted as a gift, a new chance. Even though his miracle had much more to do with his mother's faith and the powerful testimony that would be perpetuated. The unique event in Thomas's life had a profound impact throughout Brighton Hill for generations. People from neighboring villages began to visit Brighton Hill, attracted by the story of the miracle and the growing fame of the young hunter who had come back to life. William and Margaret, deeply grateful for the second chance given to their son, dedicated their lives to enjoying their days with their family, parallel to the dedication they had to maintaining faith among everyone who crossed their paths. Thomas, who had experienced death and resurrection, became a wiser young man and a deep admirer of the sacred scriptures, always dedicating himself to serving his community and sharing his experience of faith. Emily, Thomas's younger sister, inspired by the miracle, decided to follow in her mother's footsteps, started to see life from the perspective of truly believing in the existence of a divine power. And not only that, she started to learn about medicinal herbs and helping to heal the sick in the village. This later led her to seek training in medicine, specializing in pediatrics, and she took with her a life story that would make her a very spiritual and respected doctor. The miracle of Brighton Hill was more than an unbelievable story. It was a powerful testimony of faith and divine presence in the life of the community. Reverend Blackwood, in his sermons, often reflected on the event, using it as an example of the faith of a mother who achieved God's mercy. May this story inspire us all to never doubt the power we have within ourselves, even if the world is falling apart around us. Believe in the power of union and in the sincere tears that fall from your eyes in prayer, because they weigh, in a lot, in the heart of God.